Again.
Wait, you don't record all of them?
I do not record all of them, but sometimes I do. 3.4 is on point slope form, and let's start off with something that you learned in section 1. In section 1, you learned this simple formula, how to find the slope. Do you remember how to find the slope, how to find the average rate of change between 2 points? There was a simple formula for it. Let's see if you remember what it is. What's on top of this fraction? Not the y's. What do I do with the y's? We subtract y's. y2 minus y1 over
x2 minus x1.
Okay, so let's start off with that. Let me move this up a little bit. So this is a formula that helps us find the average rate of change. It helps us to find the slope. Now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to erase two things. I'm going to scribble off this 2. And I'm going to scribble off this 2 for the x. So now what I have is m equals y minus y1 over x minus x1. So far, so good. All I've done is said, oh, you know what? I don't really need the x2 and the y2. I'm going to get rid of that. Now here's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to multiply this side. Instead of dividing by x minus x1, I'm going to multiply by x minus x1. But whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. So since I multiply this side by x minus x1, I'm going to multiply this side by x minus x1. And then this is what happens. X minus x1 goes into x minus x1 one time. And anything times 1 is itself. So what we have is a new formula. And the new formula is the point slope form of the formula. Let me write it down here. You can bold it, you can underline it, you can highlight it, because here's the formula. It is, I'm going to start with the y's. Y minus y1, that's what this side is, equals, over on this side, I'm going to put the m in front because that's how it's normally written, m parentheses x minus x1. This is your point slope form that we're going to use. Point slope form. Chase?
So you just like remove the 2?
We don't need the 2's. All this is what we need for the point slope. I'll show you how it's used in a second. But the first thing we need to know is, what is the point slope form? The other thing I want you to do is I want you to underline the y1. I want you to underline the m. And I want you to underline the x1. Because just like what we did last unit, where we replaced only the things that are underlined, that's the same thing we're going to do with this point slope form. We're only going to replace those 3 things. The other thing I want you to do is I want you to write right here with a little arrow, I want you to write opposite. And I want you to draw another arrow here, and I want you to write opposite. Just like that. Point slope form looks harder than slope intercept form, but it really, if I can remember opposite, it's really easy to use. It's preferred in higher level mathematics. Let me give you an example. And this will be like number 6 on your worksheet. Number 6 says y minus 3 equals negative 2x plus 4. And there are going to be 3 directions here. The directions will say Find a point on the line. Find the slope of the line and graph. Find a point on the line, find the slope of the line, and graph it. And literally, there is very little work for you to do. It is not, this is kind of the worksheet. When I hand it to you and I give you these problems, you're not going to have to do a bunch of calculations to do it. You're literally going to go, oh, I know what the point is, if you know what the definition. So let me tell you what this means. Okay? Find a point on the line. Here's the point. What's next to your x is your x value. Let's look at this form and see how this says x minus 1. This is your x value, whatever this is, except I need to do the opposite. What is the opposite of a positive 4?
Negative 4.
And that's your x coordinate of your problem. I've started to answer the question. All I need is the y coordinate. Let's go over to the y coordinate. I just need to do the opposite of the y coordinate. What's next to the y?
Positive.
So what's the opposite of negative 3? Guess what? This is the first answer. Find a point on the line. Negative 4, positive 3. That's it. The hard part, the x's are on this side, but we have to list the x first. The y is on this side, but we have to list it second because we go in alphabetical order. X's, then y's. You've answered the first part of the question. Find a point on the line. We have it. It's right there. Do you know what the slope is? Second question. Let's look at the formula. Formula's right there. M is the thing in front of the parentheses. Do you know what your slope is for this problem? You've answered the second question. Here's the point. Here's the slope. And the last thing we have to do is graph it. Now, the reason why graphing point slope is easier than slope-intercept form is because we don't have to worry about the y-axis anymore. So let's draw a grid real quick. Here's my grid. I'm going to have to go at least 4 places. 1, 2, 3, 4 on my x-axis. I'll write down what those numbers are. And I'm going to go negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. I'm going to go my y-axis, do the same thing. Positive 1, positive 2, positive 3, positive 4. I'm going to go down, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. And then the first thing I have to graph is the point. Here's your point, negative 4, positive 3. If I'm going negative 4 for my x, I go to the left 4, and then for the y, I go up 3. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to put my point right here. That's my point. And this is called point-slope form. Meaning, I have a point. Do I have a slope? If you do, you can graph it. Do we have this point and we have a slope? So what's the rise over run here? If there's a negative, then I always want you to move the negative to the top of the function. And remember that the top of the function is negative and the bottom of the function is positive. So this is a negative 2 over 1. What that means is from this dot, I go down 2. Instead of rising 2, I'm going down 2 because it's negative. And the run is over a positive 1. Down 2 to the right 1. And I have my graph right there. All I have to have is a point and a slope, and I can graph it, and I don't have to worry. What's the y-intercept? I don't care. Doesn't matter anymore. What it does is it frees you up to draw any graph anywhere without having to figure out what the y-intercept is. Does that make sense to you? Okay, so here's what I want you to do. Now that you have that basic understanding, I hope, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to figure out how did I know what the point was And how did I know what the slope was in the graph? Don't tell me. I want you to discuss this with your neighbor.